David always preferred computers over people. At 28 years old, he worked at a big tech company called TechFlow. He was the guy everyone came to when their software stopped working, or when they needed someone to fix complicated coding problems. David was good at his job, really good. But he wasn't good at office politics or dealing with difficult people. Every morning, David would arrive at work exactly at 8:30. He'd grab his usual black coffee from the break room, sit at his desk in the corner, and lose himself in lines of code for hours. His colleagues often joked that David spoke better to computers than to humans, and honestly, they weren't wrong. But David had been working on something special for the past 6 months. It was a smart computer program that could look at huge amounts of data and spot patterns that humans might miss. This wasn't just any ordinary program. It could detect when companies were doing things that might hurt their customers, or when businesses were being dishonest about their practices. The program was David's baby. He worked late nights and weekends to perfect it. He tested it over and over again, making sure it was accurate and fair. When he finally launched it last month, he was proud of what he'd created. The program immediately started flagging some concerning patterns in their client company's data. Then the complaints started rolling in. 3 of their biggest clients had called the company, upset about what David's program had found. They said the analysis was too harsh and unfair to their business practices. These were million-dollar contracts, the kind that paid everyone's salaries and kept the lights on. That's when Lisa, the head of client relations, decided she'd had enough. Lisa was everything David wasn't. She was confident, sharp-dressed, and could convince anyone of anything. She'd been with the company for 8 years and had never lost a major client. People in the office called her the closer because she could seal any deal and smooth over any problem. She was also known for being tough on employees who caused client issues. It was a Tuesday morning when Lisa cornered David in the break room. He was stirring sugar into his coffee, thinking about a coding problem he needed to solve, when he heard her heels clicking on the floor behind him. "So, you're the genius behind our little client crisis," she said, her voice cold enough to freeze water. David turned around slowly. Lisa was standing there in her expensive suit, arms crossed, looking like she was ready for battle. "I'm sorry, what crisis?" David asked, though he had a sinking feeling he already knew. Lisa laughed. "But there was no humor in it. Don't play dumb with me. Your little computer program just cost us 3 major clients: Megacorp, Data-Driven Industries, and Global Tech. Solutions all say your analysis is too aggressive. They're threatening to take their business elsewhere." David's stomach dropped. Those weren't just any clients. They were the company's biggest accounts. Losing them would mean layoffs, budget cuts, and a lot of angry executives. "The program only shows what's actually in the data," David said quietly, still stirring his coffee. "If they don't like what it found, maybe they should look at why it found those things." Lisa's eyes flashed with anger. "Are you seriously going to stand there and lecture me about data? I've been managing client relationships since before you graduated college. These companies trust us to analyze their data fairly, not to attack their business practices." "I'm not attacking anyone," David replied, his voice getting a little stronger. "I'm just showing them what the numbers say. If the numbers show problems, then maybe there are problems that need fixing." Other employees in the break room were starting to notice the conversation. Some pretended to be busy with their phones, but David could tell they were listening. Word would spread quickly through the office. It always did. Lisa stepped closer to David, lowering her voice, but making it even more threatening. "Listen carefully, because I'm only going to say this once. You have single-handedly put this company's biggest accounts at risk. Your precious program has created a mess that I now have to clean up." David wanted to explain that his program was working exactly as it should. He wanted to tell her about all the suspicious patterns it had found, the overcharging, the data misuse, the questionable business practices. But looking at Lisa's face, he realized she probably already knew all of that. She just didn't care. "So here's what's going to happen," Lisa continued, her voice getting louder again. You and I are going to settle this once and for all. Conference room be 1 hour from now. Bring whatever data, charts, or excuses you think will help you." She paused, looking David straight in the eyes. "Consider this your chance to defend your work. But I'm warning you, I've been doing this a lot longer than you have. I know how to handle technical staff who create problems. So choose your weapon carefully, because I'm about to show everyone in this company why client relationships matter more than computer programs." David stood there holding his coffee, watching Lisa walk away. Round him, the break room had gone completely quiet. Everyone was staring at him, waiting to see what he would do. For the first time in months, maybe years, David felt something he hadn't expected. Instead of fear or panic, he felt completely calm. He thought about his program, about all those hours he'd spent making sure it would find the truth, even when the truth was uncomfortable. He thought about his younger brother, who had just started his first job at a company just like the ones his program had flagged. He thought about all the regular people who trusted these big companies with their money and personal information. David finished his coffee and walked back to his desk. He had 1 hour to prepare, and he knew exactly what he was going to do. David walked back to his desk like he was moving through thick water. Everything around him felt different now. The usual office sounds, keyboards clicking, phones ringing, people chatting about weekend plans, all seemed muffled and distant. He sat down in his chair and stared at his computer screen. His program was still running in the background, quietly analyzing data and finding patterns. It had no idea that it had just caused a storm that could end his career. Round him, his co-workers were trying not to stare, but he could feel their eyes on him. Word traveled fast in their open office space. By now, everyone probably knew that David was in trouble with Lisa, and everyone knew what that usually meant. Jake from the desk next to him leaned over. "Hey man, you okay? I heard Lisa talking to you in the break room. She looked pretty angry." David nodded without looking up. "Yeah, I'm fine. Just need to prepare for a meeting." Jake lowered his voice. "Look, I don't know what this is about, but Lisa doesn't mess around. Maybe you should talk to HR or something." David almost laughed. HR wouldn't help him. This wasn't about workplace harassment or unfair treatment. This was about money, about big clients threatening to leave, about the bottom line. HR would probably side with Lisa before David even finished explaining the situation. "Thanks, but I've got this," David said, trying to sound more confident. Then he felt, after Jake went back to his work, David opened up his program's main dashboard. For the past 6 months, this screen had been his whole world. Numbers, graphs, data patterns, they all told stories that most people couldn't see or didn't want to see. He clicked through the files from the 3 companies that had complained. Megacorp's data showed they were charging customers different prices for the same service based on their location, with rural customers paying almost 25% more. Data-driven Industries was selling customer information to advertisers without properly asking for permission first. Global Tech Solutions had been inflating their user activity numbers to charge advertisers higher rates. None of this was hidden or secret. It was all right there in the data they had sent to TechFlow. For analysis, David's program had simply done what it was designed to do: find patterns and flag potential problems. But as David sat there looking at the evidence, he realized something important. This wasn't really about his program being wrong or too aggressive. This was about these companies not wanting anyone to point out what they were doing. His phone buzzed. A text message from his brother Ryan, who worked at a marketing company downtown. "Hey, heard through a friend that you might be in some corporate drama. Everything okay?" David stared at the message for a long time before typing back. "Yeah, just work stuff. My program found some things that big companies don't want found." Ryan's response came quickly. "Dude, that's exactly the kind of stuff regular people need to know about. Don't let them push you around just because they have money." David smiled for the first time since the break room confrontation. Ryan was right. This wasn't about him versus Lisa or him versus the company. This was about whether it was okay for businesses to take advantage of regular people just because they could get away with it. He thought about all the customers in those data files. Real people with real names and real problems, people like his neighbor down the hall, who was always complaining about her internet bill going up every few months. People like his mom, who trusted companies to treat her fairly when she bought things online. David opened up a new document and started typing. Not a defensive presentation or a bunch of excuses, but something different. He was going to show everyone exactly what his program had found, in simple terms that anyone could understand. As he worked, he felt something he hadn't felt in a long time, purpose. For months, he'd been thinking of his program as just another work project, something to add to his resume or make his boss happy. But now he realized it was much more than that. This program could help protect people. It could make companies think twice before taking advantage of their customers. It could level the playing field between big businesses and regular folks who just wanted to be treated fairly. His phone rang. It was Dr. Williams, his old professor from college. David had emailed him a few months ago about the program, asking for advice on some of the technical aspects. David, I heard through the grapevine that you're dealing with some pushback on your fraud detection system. How are you holding up? David was surprised. How did you hear about that? Dr. Williams chuckled. The tech world is smaller than you think, especially when someone creates something as impressive as what you've built. I've been following your work, and I have to say, I'm proud of what you've accomplished. Well, some people aren't very happy about it, David said. Of course they're not. You've built something that tells the truth about how businesses operate. That makes a lot of people uncomfortable, especially people who profit from dishonest practices. Dr. Williams paused. You know, I've been in this field for 30 years, and I've seen a lot of brilliant programmers create amazing things. But the ones who make a real difference are the ones who stand behind their work, even when it's difficult. After the call ended, David felt more confident than he had all day. He wasn't just some troublemaker causing problems for his company. He was a programmer who had created something valuable, something that could help protect people from being taken advantage of. He spent the next 30 minutes not preparing charts or defensive arguments, but reviewing the actual impact of what his program had found. Real money that had been overcharged to real people. Personal information that had been sold without permission. Fake numbers that had led to higher prices for everyone. David looked around the office one more time. His coworkers were still stealing glances at him, probably wondering if he would still have a job by the end of the day. Some looked worried for him. Others looked like they were already distancing themselves, not wanting to be associated with someone who was in trouble with management. But David wasn't thinking about his job anymore. He was thinking about doing the right thing, even if it was scary. Even if it meant standing up to someone as intimidating as Lisa. He saved his work, closed his laptop, and took a deep breath. It was almost time for the meeting, and for the first time since this whole thing started, David felt ready. Conference room B was packed like a courtroom on the day of a big trial. David had never seen so many important people in one place at the same time. The CEO, Mr. Peterson, sat at the head of the long table looking tired and stressed. The head of sales, Mrs. Rodriguez, was checking her phone constantly, probably dealing with angry clients. The chief technology officer, Tom Chen, looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. Word had spread through the office faster than David expected. This wasn't just a meeting anymore. It was an event. People were finding excuses to walk past the conference room, trying to catch a glimpse of what was happening inside. Lisa had positioned herself like a general preparing for war. She had her laptop open, a thick stack of papers arranged perfectly in front of her, and that look on her face that meant business. She'd even changed into a different jacket, her most expensive one that she usually saved for client meetings. David walked in carrying just his laptop and one manila folder. Compared to Lisa's elaborate setup, he looked almost unprepared. Several people in the room exchanged glances, probably wondering if David had any idea what he was walking into. All right, everyone. Thank you for being here, Mr. Peterson began, looking round the room. I know this is unusual, but we have a situation that needs to be resolved quickly, Lisa. You called this meeting, so the floor is yours. Lisa stood up, slowly, her heels clicking on the floor as she moved to the front of the room. She was in her element now, commanding attention from everyone present. Thank you, Mr. Peterson. Ladies and gentlemen, we're here because of a serious problem that's threatening our company's most important relationships. She gestured toward David without looking at him. 3 of our biggest clients have expressed serious concerns about the analysis they receive from us. They're saying our reports are unfair, aggressive, and damaging to their business reputations. She clicked her laptop, and a presentation appeared on the wall screen. The first slide showed the logos of Megacorp, Data-Driven Industries, and Global Tech Solutions, 3 companies everyone in the room recognized as major accounts. These aren't small complaints, Lisa continued. These are million-dollar contracts we're talking about. Contracts that pay salaries, fund our research, and keep this company competitive in the market. She clicked to the next slide, which showed a graph of potential revenue loss if these clients left. The numbers were staggering. Losing these 3 accounts would mean the company would have to cut costs dramatically. Megacorp has been with us for 5 years, Lisa said, her voice getting more passionate. They trusted us to provide fair, balanced analysis of their customer data. Instead, they received a report that questioned their pricing strategies and suggested they were intentional. Lie overcharging customers. She clicked again. Another slide appeared with quotes from the upset clients. Data-Driven Industries called our analysis invasive and presumptuous. They've been a loyal client for 3 years, and now they're questioning whether we understand the realities of modern business. David sat quietly, watching Lisa work the room like a professional speaker. She was good at this, really good. She knew how to present information in a way that made her point seem obvious and reasonable. In Global Tech Solutions, Lisa continued, a company that has brought us over $2 million in revenue over the past 4 years. Called our latest report unnecessarily harsh and potentially damaging to their reputation. She turned to face the room full of executives. The problem isn't with our clients. The problem is with how we're analyzing their data. We've become so focused on finding problems that we're forgetting these are businesses trying to operate in a competitive marketplace. The head of sales nodded along. The CFO was taking notes. Even Tom Chen, the CTO, looked concerned about the financial implications. Lisa clicked to her final slide. I'm recommending that we roll back the changes to our analysis program immediately. We need to return to providing the kind of balanced, business-friendly reports that have made us successful. We can still be thorough without being accusatory. She closed her laptop and looked directly at David for the first time since the meeting began. I've said my piece. Now I think we should hear from the person who created this problem. The room fell completely silent. All eyes turned to David, who was still sitting quietly at the far end of the table. He could feel the weight of everyone's expectations pressing down on him. Peterson cleared his throat. David, we'd like to hear your side of this. Can you explain what your program does and why these clients are so upset? David stood up slowly, his legs feeling a little shaky. Public speaking had never been his strong suit, especially not in front of this many important people. But as he looked around the room, something strange happened. Instead of feeling nervous, he felt calm. Mr. Peterson, everyone, thank you for giving me the chance to explain. David opened his laptop and connected it to the projector. Lisa asked me earlier today to select my weapon for this meeting. I thought about that for a long time. He looked around the room, making eye contact with each person. Lisa brought charts about revenue and client satisfaction. She brought quotes from upset companies and projections about financial losses. Those are all important things. David's first slide appeared on the screen. It wasn't fancy or colorful, like Lisa's presentation. It was just a simple data dashboard with numbers and graphs. But I only brought one weapon to this meeting, David said, his voice getting stronger and clearer. I brought the truth. The room was so quiet you could hear the air conditioning humming. David clicked to his next slide, which showed a detailed Breakdown of Megacorp's customer data. This is what my program found when it analyzed Megacorp's pricing data. They charge customers in rural areas an average of 24% more for the exact same services they provide to customers in big cities. The program flagged this because it fits the pattern of what we call geographic discrimination. Mrs. Rodriguez, the head of sales, shifted uncomfortably in her chair. But David, that could just be because it costs more to provide services. In rural areas, David clicked to the next screen. That's what I thought too, until I looked deeper. The extra costs for rural service delivery account for about 6% of the price difference. The other 18% appears to be pure profit, taken from customers who have fewer options and less ability to shop around. He could see people in the room starting to pay attention in a different way now. These weren't just numbers anymore. They were real situations affecting real people. This isn't a mistake or an error in my program, David continued. This is exactly what the program was designed to find. Companies that take advantage of customers who don't have other choices. The room was starting to feel different now. The energy had shifted from Lisa's confident presentation to something more uncomfortable, more questioning. David realized he had everyone's full attention now, and for the first time in his career, he knew exactly what he wanted to say. David clicked to his next slide, and the atmosphere in the room shifted completely. What had started as Lisa's confident presentation about business relationships was now becoming something entirely different. The executives were leaning forward in their chairs, suddenly much more interested in what David had to say. Let me show you what else my program found, David said, his voice steady and clear. Data-driven industries complained that our analysis was invasive. Here's what we actually discovered. The screen showed a complex data flow chart that David had simplified into easy-to-understand graphics. Data-driven industries has been collecting customer email addresses, phone numbers, and shopping habits through their website. Nothing wrong with that. Most companies do it. But here's where it gets interesting. He clicked to the next screen. They've been selling this information to third-party advertisers without clearly telling customers they're doing it. The consent form customers sign mentions sharing data with partners, but it's buried in paragraph 12 of a 15-paragraph agreement that most people never read completely. Mrs. Rodriguez from sales looked uncomfortable. But David, that's technically legal if customers agree to the terms. You're absolutely right, David replied. It is technically legal. But my program isn't just looking for illegal activities. It's looking for practices that might be legal, but ethically questionable. And selling customer data while hiding that fact in complicated legal language definitely falls into that category. He clicked again. The screen now showed dollar amounts. That made several people in the room gasp quietly. Over the past year, data-driven industries made approximately $2.3 million from selling customer information. That's money they made from their customers' personal data, without most of those customers realizing it was happening. When my program flagged this pattern, they called us invasive. Tom Chen, the CTO, spoke up for the first time. David, how confident are you in these numbers? Completely confident, David replied. I spent 3 weeks double-checking this data because I couldn't believe it myself. But it's all there in their own records. They sent us this information as part of their regular data analysis request. The room was getting quieter, and David could see that people were starting to understand what he was really showing them. This wasn't just about difficult clients or overly aggressive analysis. This was about companies doing things that most people would find unfair, then getting upset when someone pointed it out. Now let me show you Global Tech Solutions, David continued, clicking to his final client analysis. They said our report was unnecessarily harsh. Here's what we found in their user engagement data. The screen displayed two sets of numbers side by side. On the left were the user activity numbers that Global Tech reported to advertisers. On the right were the actual user activity numbers from their internal systems. Global Tech Solutions has been inflating their user engagement statistics by about 40%. When they report to advertising companies, they count every page load as active engagement. even if someone just clicked on their website by accident and left immediately. David clicked to show a detailed breakdown. This means advertising companies are paying for ad space based on fake numbers. They think they're reaching 40% more active users than they actually are, and because advertising rates are based on engagement levels, Global Tech has been overcharging their advertising clients by hundreds of thousands of dollars. The CFO was now taking detailed notes. Mr. Peterson had put down his phone and was paying complete attention. Even Lisa was staring at the screen with a look David had never seen on her face before. Here's what makes this really interesting, David continued. When Global Tech complained to us about our harsh analysis, they specifically asked us to remove the sections about user engagement metrics. They said it was proprietary information that shouldn't be included in data analysis reports. He paused, letting that information sink in before continuing. But they didn't ask us to check our math or verify our conclusions. They didn't say we got the numbers wrong. They just wanted us to stop talking about it. David closed his laptop and looked around the room. The silence was complete now, but it was a different kind of silence than before. It wasn't the uncomfortable quiet of someone in trouble. It was the thoughtful silence of people processing important information. Every single client that complained about my program had one thing in common. David said, his voice clear and confident. They weren't upset because we made mistakes. They weren't angry because we misunderstood their data. They were upset because we correctly identified things they were doing that they didn't want anyone to notice. Lisa finally spoke, and for the first time since David had known her, she sounded uncertain. David, you're talking about our biggest clients. These companies trust us with their most sensitive business data. If we start questioning every business practice they have, we won't have any clients left. David looked directly at her. Lisa, I understand your concern about keeping clients happy, but I have a question for everyone in this room. He gestured toward the screen, which still showed the data from all three companies. What kind of company do we want to be? Do we want to be the kind of company that helps businesses hide questionable practices from their customers? Or do we want to be the kind of company that helps businesses operate more honestly and fairly? Mr. Peterson leaned back in his chair, looking thoughtful. David, what you're showing us is certainly concerning, but Lisa has a point about client relationships. How do we balance being thorough with being practical? David had been hoping someone would ask that exact question. Mr. Peterson, I think there's a different way to look at this problem. What if instead of seeing this as a client relations issue, we see it as a business opportunity? He opened his laptop again and pulled up one more slide he had prepared. There are thousands of companies out there who want to do business honestly, but don't know how to identify and fix problems in their operations. There are customers who would choose to do business with companies they trust over companies that are cheaper but less ethical. And there are investors who specifically look for companies with good ethical practices. The room was listening intently now. What if HFY became known as the company that helps businesses operate more fairly? What if instead of losing clients who don't like honest analysis, we attract clients who want honest analysis? David could see people in the room starting to think differently about the situation. Instead of seeing his program as a problem that was costing them clients, they were starting to see it as a tool that could attract better clients. My program doesn't just find problems, David continued. It can also identify companies that are already operating ethically. We could offer certification programs, help companies improve their practices, and become the go-to firm for businesses that want to prove they're trustworthy. For the first time since the meeting started, David saw Mr. Peterson smile slightly. That's an interesting perspective, David. Very interesting indeed. The meeting ended with Mr. Peterson asking everyone except David and Lisa to leave the room. David watched as the executives filed out, most of them looking thoughtful and a few whispering quietly to each other. He could tell that his presentation had made an impact, but he wasn't sure what would happen next. David, Lisa, please sit down, Mr. Peterson said once the room was empty. We need to discuss how we're going to handle this situation. For the next hour, the three of them talked through the implications of everything David had presented. Lisa, to her credit, asked tough but fair questions about the accuracy of the data and the potential legal issues around the client contracts. David answered everything as honestly as he could, providing additional details when needed. Finally, Mr. Peterson stood up. I need some time to think about this and discuss it with the other executives. David, can you give us until tomorrow? Morning. David nodded. Of course, I understand this is a big decision. As they left the conference room, Lisa walked beside David toward their desks. She was quiet for a long time before finally speaking. You know, I still think you're naive about how business works, she said. But I have to admit, your data is solid. I spent the last hour trying to find holes in your analysis, and I couldn't find any. David looked at her, surprised by the admission. I'm not saying I agree with your approach. Lisa continued, but I respect the fact that you stood up for your work. Not many people would have done that, especially against someone like me. That evening, David went home feeling exhausted but oddly peaceful. He'd done everything he could do. Whether he still had a job tomorrow was out of his hands now, but at least he'd been honest about what his program had found. His brother Ryan called that night. So, how did the big meeting go? David told him everything that had happened, from Lisa's presentation to his own counter-argument to the hour-long discussion afterward. Dude, I'm proud of you, Ryan said. I know that wasn't easy, but you did the right thing. Whatever happens, at least you know you stood up for what you believe in. The next morning, David arrived at work not knowing what to expect. Would there be a box on his desk for packing his things? Would security be waiting to escort him out? Would everyone pretend nothing had happened? Instead, he found an email from Mr. Peterson asking him to come to his office at 9 o'clock. David knocked on the CEO's door exactly at 9, his heart pounding. Come in, David. Please, have a seat. Mr. Peterson looked like he hadn't slept much. There were coffee cups and papers scattered across his desk, suggesting he'd been working late into the night. David, I want you to know that we spent most of yesterday evening and early this morning discussing your presentation. We also had our legal team review the client contracts and the data you showed us. David held his breath. First, I want to apologize. We should have recognized the value of what your program was finding instead of just focusing on client complaints. You were doing exactly what we hired you to do, provide accurate, thorough data analysis. David felt a wave of relief wash over him. Second, we've made some decisions about how to move forward. We're going to be ending our contracts with Megacorp, Data-Driven Industries, and Global Tech Solutions. Our legal team confirmed that their practices, while technically legal, create too much liability risk for our company. David was stunned. He'd expected to be fired, not to see the clients terminated. But more importantly, Mr. Peterson continued, we want to create a new position in the company. We're calling it Director of Ethical Analysis. The job would involve expanding your program to work with all our clients, ensuring that we're not just providing good data analysis, but helping companies operate more ethically. David couldn't believe what he was hearing. The position would come with a significant salary increase and a team of 3 analysts to help you. You'd also have input on which clients we take on and which ones we decide not to work with. Mr. Peterson smiled. Lisa will be transitioning to a new role as Director of Client Education, where she'll help companies understand and implement the recommendations from your ethical analysis reports. 6 months later, David was sitting in his new office, looking out the window at the city below. His ethical analysis program had become the cornerstone of HFY's business model. They were now known throughout the industry as the company that helped businesses operate more honestly and transparently. The phone rang. It was a potential new client, a small startup that had heard about HFY's ethical certification program. We want to make sure we're doing everything right from the beginning, the caller said. We've heard that you guys can help companies build trust with their customers by operating more ethically. David smiled as he scheduled the meeting. This was exactly the kind of client call he hoped they would start getting. Later that afternoon, Lisa stopped by his office in her new role. She'd become surprisingly effective at helping companies implement ethical practices. It turned out her skills at persuasion worked just as well for encouraging good behavior as they had for protecting questionable behavior, she said. Sitting down across from his desk, I have to admit something. This new approach is actually more challenging and interesting than what I was doing before. It's harder to help companies improve their practices than it is to make excuses for bad practices. David laughed. I'm glad you're finding it rewarding. I am, and I want you to know something else. Lisa looked serious now. That day in the break room, when I challenged you to that meeting, I was wrong. I thought you were just a troublemaker who didn't understand business. But you understood something I didn't, that good business and ethical business don't have to be opposites. As Lisa left his office, David turned back to his computer. His program was running its analysis on a new client's data, looking for patterns and potential problems. But now, instead of causing stress and conflict, the program was helping companies build better relationships with their customers. David thought back to that moment in the break room when Lisa had told him to select his weapon. He'd chosen truth, and it had changed everything, not just for him, but for his entire company. Sometimes, he realized, the most powerful thing you can do is simply refuse to compromise on what you know is right. And sometimes, when you stand up for your principles, you discover that other people were just waiting for someone to show them a better way forward. The industry had noticed TechFlow's new approach. Other companies were starting to offer similar ethical analysis services. David's program hadn't just changed his own career. It was helping to change how the entire industry thought about the relationship between profit and principles. And that felt pretty good.